Boy, hasn't this been a day. Judy Kroll was our kids' almost absolute favorite teacher. I have to say, what a fabulous day it's been. I have learned about butterflies and electrovoltaic, or whatever that was, grids, and this has been a day. So I am so humbled to have the opportunity to be here today. My wife said, rambling Rick. Don't make it rambling Rick. I'm hoping I'm more green than I am yellow. So it was 1868 in the pharmacy when Mr. Bennett, sitting behind his pharmacy table, sees his dear friend. Mr. Webster, who had been a musician, and the two of them had worked together earlier, come into the room. He knew Webster was a kind of a melancholic, sad, kind of emotional roller coaster kind of a guy, and he knew just by the way he walked that it was going to be one of those days for Webster. And Bennett said, how you doing, Webster? And Webster, anything the matter? Webster said, I'll be all right by and by. And he knew full well there was a problem, and he immediately sat down and jotted off words to a song. And he looked to Webster, who couldn't face him. His back was to him. And Bennett said, "Here, Webster, here's your prescription." And Webster looked at it, and his eyes lit up and pulled out of the darkness, and he wrote down a few notes, and then his violin was there, and he played a few things, and then in a matter of a half an hour, the two of them drew the two customers who had been ignored for that half an hour to join them in singing the song they had just written. There's a land that is fairer than day, and by far we can see it afar, for the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there. In the peace, in the sweet by and by, we will meet on that beautiful shore. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. It was desperate sadness of Webster's that brought a communication between those two friends, a spiritual connect that was magic and brought him out of the doldrums. But there is so much desperate sadness in this world. Think about the stories we heard today about women caught in sexual trade and the Ebola virus. You think about the disasters that have occurred on this shore and on others. But then you think about, as an earlier speaker spoke about, the bigotry that is in this country, the hatred right on this campus, the hatred against Jews, the hatred against blacks, the hatred against Muslims, the hatred against women, the hatred against homosexual. It seems to be anybody that's different, that's not like me. The hatred. And the result of that hatred has occurred throughout the centuries, but it is happening in this century. And the Nazis' genocide of the Jews, the Hutu genocide of the Tutsis, the Christians' genocide against the Muslims in Bosnia, the genocide, the Syrian president poisoning his own people, the beheadings occurring, this hatred that is here, and it's here on this campus. This hatred is really probably coming from fear of anybody different, but it's here. And it's not only hatred of others, it's hatred within. People turning hatred against themselves. The depression that I see, walking into an emergency room and having to go to tell the family about the suicide of this young person, the suicide about this middle-aged person, the suicide against the older person. There is dispirited feelings in this world. And I have to say that it brought me to the memory when I was a brand new intern at the VA hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, and here was this up-and-coming helicopter pilot leader. He was like being spirited into the leadership of the Eastern Shore Board of all of the Army helicopter units or something grand. I mean, this man was powerful, and he was growing, and he was it, but he had some severe back pain, and he was seen on his base, and then they sent him to the VA hospital, and the resident said, "Rick, this one's yours." And I remember examining him, hearing the story of the severe pain in his back, and then, as I turned and went on the backside to start the exam of his lungs, before I did that, I felt his neck, and here is a hard nodule. It was obvious, and I knew just that moment, it was like, boom, he's got metastatic lung cancer. And he did, and it was spread to his back. And it was in 1978, I think, or something, death knell. And I remember his anger. He had quit smoking a month or two earlier, He was mad at everybody. He was mad at me. His whole life was him. And it's going. And contrast that with not too many years later, really, here in Brookings, maybe 20 years ago, one of the best SDSU biology professors came down with a malignancy he was definitely dying from this malignancy, and he was really connected to his students. His students loved him because he loved them. And he loved his family. Boy, I saw a love that was, as I cared for him and did some home visits, and as he was dying, I could see all that happening. He was really an SDSU supporter. I mean, a spirited, football supporter, but, he was involved with the biology organizations in the state and in the nation. He was a biology teacher. He was connected to all of the environment. I mean, he was a birder. He and his wife, and after he died, his wife continued this birding that they banded and they monitored and they watched in their home in the country. The birds just were everywhere. He was connected to everything and everybody, it seemed. And as he was dying, when I went into his presence, I felt bigger, I felt fuller, I felt joyous. And it was okay. He was losing something, but he wasn't losing all of him because, he was everybody. He was connected. He had a spiritual connection that was, something to behold. And compare that to the black, dark hole that was in the room when I would walk past the room of the VA helicopter pilot. I mean, I could just feel my soul being sucked out of me as I went into that room to examine him. I avoided it like a plague. I couldn't take too long in that room. The Spirit is a powerful thing. It's interesting that the word spirit is from Latin spiritus, which means breath. When we're born, we take that first breath and we are inspiring. And then when we're dead, we take that last breath, and then when we let it out, as our elasticity of the lung pushes it out automatically, we expire. In many languages, the word spirit or soul is tied to the word breath. But it is something about the power of the Spirit as a group. We can all feel that, the support that we get when we have a group of people that we meet and we love, and they bolster you, they support us. It's the friendship, probably, that is the most important connection that you have. You have somebody that you are connected to, your spouse, your best friend, or your child, or your mom and dad. That spiritual connection that is so important. That friendship Bennett was to Webster. So how do we cope in a time of such sadness? How do we improve our ability to hear that connectedness, enhance that connectedness? I would dare say that a student blogging or Facebooking negative things would make us want to close off. And I think we have to see that 10% or 5% or 1% or 10% of the world has had such a tough life early on. They don't have a connectedness. They don't see it. They'll never get it. They don't understand it. And if we let them win, we will let them make us close off. We need to not let that closing happen. We need to open our hearts. I think that it's an important thing to realize that that's one way. Well, I also would say that religions throughout time, I think, began because someone died, and there was a sense of tremendous loss, and the family and the circle of friends and the community would wrap their loving arms around that person, that family who had that devastating loss, and communicate in a spiritual way. I would dare say that religions that speak to justice and compassion is the message that all religions have been saying, and that we need to listen to those, not to murderers who murder and cause hate in the name of religion. I would say also a lesson about hate. It was Krista Tippett who I listened to this last weekend. Again, I've heard it before, where she at Emory, my alma mater, had brought together a group of 4 great leaders of religions to speak about what is the center of happiness. And they asked the Presbyterian minister and the Jewish rabbi and the Muslim leader, and they also had the Dalai Lama. And it was interesting, at the end of the discussion, they were talking about this, and the Muslim leader said that the most important part of hate is to feel it within you and to let go. He says, in fact, the right word, this Islam leader, Islam meaning, salam, Islam, peace. I have peace. He said to find that peace, you need to let go of hate. We call that jihad. And the Dalai Lama looked at him and he said, Buddhism, we think that that's the meaning of all Buddhism, jihad. So I have to say that there's been a lot of things that help me realize my connectedness. I have realized in a lifetime of practice of medicine that the sense of that connectedness is more important than almost anything. I do use the diagnostic tools that are at my hand, as Reese discussed. I order the tests when I need to. I do my very careful history and physical exam, probably the most important part of any interaction, taking a history and interacting and listening as hard as I can, not only for their story, but to hear their spirit. And I have to say that if there's one lesson I would share with you as a physician these years, that of all the medicines that I have, there is no powerful medicine that I have at my beck and call than to care, to look at that patient and to mean it and to say, I care. And then there's this spiritual connectedness. I also think that when you're in a crowd and there's something funny, we all laugh about it. Laughter, you can hear the laughter of the crowd, and that bolsters more laughter. Isn't that true? And it's the tears that you can feel when something is so very sad too. I'm part of a choral group, the Hopeful Spirit Chorale, that meets on Tuesday nights. And it's a mixed group of all different religions. We don't have anybody outside of Christianity yet, but we're sure open to it. And we sing hymns. We meet on Tuesday nights and we practice for a half an hour. And then we sing for someone, oftentimes hospice patient, not always, someone in need of a hopeful spirit. And we sing for a half an hour, sometimes at their home, sometimes around their bed in the nursing home or at the hospital. And this particular day, this man was very, very sick. It was a Tuesday. That's when we sing, and I'm kind of on the hunt for a patient to sing for. And he was on his deathbed, just barely hanging on, hurting. And the family, it was a kind of a tough family. They were not financially well-to-do. They were there loving him, though. This was a picture that I said, wow, and I walked in and I said, could we sing for your dad? And I asked him, and he was semi-comatose, or he was kind of there, and he said yes. They said, okay. So that night, after we practiced, we drove to the hospital. We all went up to North Circle and into room 6, and I walked, and there's a son sitting by his bed, and his head is just hanging as low can be. And I said, we're here to sing. And he nodded. And we got around the bed of the patient, and I'm picking a page on our book, and I'm looking at the patient, and I said, we're going to 372, and the patient, I'm looking, and the patient's not breathing. And I said to the son, sir, your dad, I think your dad's not breathing. Oh yeah, he died half an hour ago. And I said, well, could we sing for you? And he said, sure. And it was just then the 3 sisters came in, and I'll never forget it. He was sitting there. There was another one that sat on the edge of his chair, and 2 that were standing. And we sang to them. and they wept. As I did. Thank goodness I had more people singing because I couldn't sing. And it was just a beautiful moment of a spiritual connection, something that we all need. We all need to realize that in this desperately sad world, it's not the money. It's not power. As Carl Sandburg said, who gets more than the lovers in the dust, in the cool tombs? We are all going to come to the end, as that man in that room did. And the thing that helps us get through this and to realize the beauty in this is that connectedness. We don't want that 5 or 10 or 1% stop. Don't let them stop you. Practice. Open your heart. And bring together, allow that spirit, that breath, that soul to interchange. In this desperately sad world, we can cope by listening, sensing, rejoicing in our spiritual connectedness. There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar, for the Father